Hey friends, welcome back to Homestead on a Prayer. Today we're here with an exciting pumpkin bread bake-off in honor of the beginning of fall. This video is actually a collab with Andrea over at Digging for Health. She's doing Pumpkin Palooza for the first week in October. So we decided to jump in with a pumpkin bread recipe. So pretty much every year my husband Dan makes this pumpkin bread. That is his basic one and only baking claim to fame, right?
Pretty much.
So the recipe calls for a can of pumpkin puree, and this year we decided to put it to the test. So Dan is going to make his bread the classic way the recipe calls for with the can of pumpkin puree. I am going to be using pumpkin puree that I roasted and pureed myself from a sugar pumpkin. So we're going to see if using a fresh pumpkin really does make it better or if it's just as good to go with the can. So first we're going to step back in time and I'm going to show you earlier when I roasted and pureed the pumpkin, and then we'll meet you back here to get started with the recipe. So in preparation for my bake-off with Dan later tonight, I am going to be roasting and pureeing this pumpkin. This will be the pumpkin puree that I'm going to use in my pumpkin bread. So full disclosure, I have never cooked a whole pumpkin and made pumpkin puree before. So we'll see how this goes together. So first I'm going to go ahead and cut my pumpkin in half. So after a struggle with this pumpkin of at least 30 seconds or a minute or so, thanks to the power of editing, you've been spared from witnessing that, we finally got this pumpkin split open. So I'm going to go ahead and scoop all the seeds out and put them in here. These will be a treat for my chickens tomorrow. So our pumpkins are all cleaned out. I got all the seeds and all the seeds and the strings out. So now I'm just going to very carefully put a light layer of olive oil on these. This would definitely be easier to use a basting brush, or maybe not easier, but it would be less messy to use a basting brush. I'm just going to go ahead and rub it on here with my hands. Just want to give it a light coat. Then we're going to sprinkle it with just a little bit of salt. We're going to turn these face down, and we're going to cook them in the oven at 350 degrees for about 45 minutes. This is what I've been told. I've never actually done this, so your guess is as good as mine as to how well this will turn out. And there's the competition sitting there looking all smug. So our pumpkin's done roasting and it's had a chance to cool off. So now we are going to scoop all the flesh out of these pumpkin rinds and we are going to puree it and then set it aside to make our pumpkin bread later. So you can see how it came out. It's nice and soft and roasted. So I'm just going to go ahead and scrape this out. Should come out pretty easily, which it seems like it is. We just want to separate it from the rind and then scoop that all into our food processor here. So I'm just going to puree this up and we'll see how much we got. So here you see all the flesh from our pumpkin loaded up into our food processor. So let's go ahead and blend that up. So now that we've got this all blended up nice and smoothly, we're going to go ahead and measure it and see how much we got. I'm just going to store it in this container here until we're ready to bake our pumpkin bread with it. So as long as we have at least 2 cups, we should be good. Because I believe that's how much comes in one of those cans of pumpkin puree. So we just want to make sure we have enough to make our pumpkin bread, which I think we should have plenty. So here's our first cup. I'm going to take a guess that we have just about 2 cups. Actually, we might have a little bit extra. So what I'm going to do is just keep 2 cups in here because that's how much we're going to need for our pumpkin bread. And then we're going to put the rest of this in a separate container to use for another recipe. So I ended up with almost an extra cup of pumpkin puree. So I think I'm going to have to browse some of these other Pumpkin Palooza recipes to find an idea of what to do with this last cup. I was thinking about maybe making pumpkin donuts, but I'm definitely going to take a look at the other recipes and see if there's anything else that jumps out at me. All right, so we're back. We're both armed with our pumpkin of choice. So Dan has his can of pumpkin. Yep. Here is the pumpkin puree that we made together just a few minutes ago. So we're going to bring you guys over to the counter and we're going to show you what other ingredients we have in our delicious pumpkin bread. So the first thing we're going to do before we really get baking is to go ahead and preheat our oven to 350 degrees. So I'm going to get that done. So this recipe actually makes a couple loaves of pumpkin bread. We only have 2 glass baking dishes here, so we're each going to take one. And then what we're going to do with the rest of our batter is we are going to make pumpkin muffins. So this is going to be kind of an experiment too, because I've never made pumpkin muffins with this. Have you made pumpkin muffins?
Never.
Okay, so neither of us has tried making pumpkin muffins with this before. So we're going to each make 1 loaf and then make some pumpkin muffins, and we'll give it all a taste test at the end and let you know if it is worth going the extra step and using the fresh pumpkin. All right, so we're going to get started with our recipe. Now keep in mind, Dan has made this recipe a lot of times before. This is going to be my first time making it, so I'm going to be kind of figuring it out as we go. So
pressure's
you might want to follow him for the pro directions. So you're going to want 2 mixing bowls. I'm going to use the smaller one for wet ingredients and the bigger one for dry. Right, that's what you do. The smaller one has the wet ingredients.
I believe so. It's been a while since I've made this.
All right, well, we will find out. Okay, so we've got our oven preheated to 350, or preheating to 350. So, oh no, I was wrong. We want the wet ingredients in the bigger one, because this is the one that's ultimately going to have everything in it. So we want our dry ingredients to go in the smaller one. So into your bigger bowl, the ingredients that you're going to need are your pumpkin puree in whatever form it takes. You're going to want 4 eggs. We've got eggs fresh from our chickens. Now, this recipe actually calls for a cup of vegetable oil. That seemed kind of excessive to us. So we use about half a cup of oil, and then we replace the other half the cup of oil with applesauce. So because I'm replacing half of the oil with applesauce, that's going to make it a little bit sweeter. So I'm also going to cut down the sugar that I'm using in mine. I don't know. Do you ever do that, Dan, or do you use the full sugar?
I know. I just use the full sugar myself.
All right. So maybe this isn't going to be a completely fair test. I just can't bring myself to use 3 cups of sugar in this recipe. So since I'm using applesauce, I'm going to cut down my sugar a little bit. And we are also going to need some water into our large bowl.
So I'm going to open up this can of puree. I guess I am cheating in comparison to my wife, who went to all the labor and trial of making legit pumpkin puree.
Although, to be fair, you are the one who's following the recipe, so we'll see what happens.
That's true.
So I'm going to go ahead and take my pumpkin puree, which I did not cheat to make, into this bowl here. And that sound was our oven preheating, so...
There's quite a color contrast here between the two, let's say.
Oh. Yeah, yours is intensely orange. Here, bring your pumpkin over so we can compare the color. That's a pretty... There's a lot of variation in oranges there. We'll see what happens with that. So I'm going to be adding in the 4 eggs into the pumpkin puree. I'm going to just crack them individually into this mug first. I always do that when I'm using eggs because you never know when you might get a bad one and ruin your dish. And after I put all that work into my pumpkin, I definitely do not want to ruin it and have to start over. So, and the yolks are about the same color as the pumpkin. That's interesting.
Here we go.
Oh yeah, that is very orange. So there's the shot, pumpkin and eggs. Now, pretty much whenever a recipe calls for vegetable oil, I am not going to use vegetable oil, so I have olive oil here. It does have a little bit of a stronger flavor, but the stronger flavor really doesn't bother me, and I really don't like to use vegetable oil when I'm cooking. So olive oil it is. Okay. So I'm going to measure out half a cup of applesauce, since we are replacing half of that oil with applesauce. Here you go.
Thank you, Millie.
I will say that I think Dan's pumpkin bread so far is looking a little bit more festive. I don't know, you want to show everybody your pumpkin bread?
I can't.
Here.
Oops.
Definitely more fall colored. Okay, so next I'm going to measure out 2/3 of a cup of water, and I'm going to go ahead and add that into our liquid ingredients. And then the recipe calls for 3 cups of sugar to be added to our liquid ingredients as well. I'm probably going to go with about 2.5, so we'll see if that's a bad choice or not at the end. All right, so 2/3 of a cup of water into our liquid ingredients. Now I'm going to go ahead and measure out a little. I'm not going to be too precise with my 2.5 cups of sugar. We're just going to take 3 cups and not fill them up all the way. All right, let the record show that I just prevented Dan from making a deadly mistake with his pumpkin bread. So I could have just let that slide and taken the easy win there, but I pointed it out and let him know. So, all right, let's finish adding the rest of the sugar. Do you have anything you want to say to that?
There's not a big difference between 1 and 2/3 and just 2/3. Just saying.
Yeah, definitely not. We'll see if Dan can be trusted on his own. I'm back to adding sugar to this. Okay, so that's my third cup, not third of a cup. This is my 3rd cup, and it's a little light on the sugar there. So this is all of our liquid ingredients. We're going to go ahead and whisk these all together. So what are we going to do with all this pumpkin bread, Dan? We're going to end up with about twice as much as normal. That's a lot of pumpkin bread.
That is. I love pumpkin bread though, so I don't see an issue.
I may end up freezing my pumpkin muffins. We'll see what happens. Yeah, that's a pretty serious difference.
Something in the bread is going to look quite a bit different
Yeah.
once it's done baking.
All right, so our liquid ingredients are all measured and mixed up. So now in our smaller bowl here, we're going to start adding our dry ingredients and then get everything all combined. So we're going to need flour, baking soda, salt, and then our spices. We need cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, and ginger. That's where it starts to get really aromatic and delicious smelling.
So you want your flour.
Sure. 3.5 cups of flour. I hope I have a big enough bowl here. We will find out.
Oh, so you're not really being all that precise.
No, I'm a bad baker. All right, 3.5 cups of flour. I think that should be fine. This is the only really bulky dry ingredient we have in here. All right, so what else do we need? Baking soda. We need 2 teaspoons of baking soda. Oh, Dan's being all precise.
Yes.
You saw how lackadaisical I was with measuring my flour.
It's all about the science of baking.
Yes. Okay, so salt is 1.5 teaspoons, which is the same as 1/2 tablespoon. I'm going to be super precise with this too.
Mine is going to be better.
Well, yours is definitely going to be more precise. They say you're supposed to be really precise with baking. If you've seen my other videos, you know that I am not so much. But I will say my stuff still comes out pretty good. So we'll see if that's true this time. So we have, in here we have flour, baking soda, salt. So I'm going to go ahead and add a teaspoon of cinnamon. And then we're also going to need a teaspoon of nutmeg.
Oh, we're organic.
All right. Oh, I overdid the nutmeg.
Is that possible?
Yes, it's easily possible. Nutmeg is one of those things that's really easy to overdo. All right, now, whoa, that smells strong. Okay, so now we need 1/2 teaspoon of ground cloves. And I'm sure Dan is over there measuring his spices with a knife and scraping the top off so it's perfect and smooth. Are you doing that, Dan?
On some of it, yes.
Ah, see, he did do it.
Not on all.
All right, we also need a 1/4 teaspoon of ground ginger, and that is our last spice and our last ingredient.
I feel like this recipe was a little bit light on the nutmeg flavor this time. I might add a little bit more. You want a shot of this?
Yes, of
Well,
how
going-
precise you're being.
Well, no, I'm going a little bit more in this one because I
Oh.
felt like last time it wasn't quite enough. So there's a little bit more in there.
Okay, but yet you're still measuring it with
Well,
your
I don't
knife.
want to go too crazy with it.
My whisk is all wet, so we're going to mix up the dry ingredients with the wooden spoon here.
Unless it was the clove that was too light. I don't know.
Dan's pumpkin bread is going to be really spicy, I think. So here's our dry ingredients all incorporated.
I want a little bit more on the clove.
So we'll let you know if that was a good idea. Now, what I'm going to do is prepare my pan. I'm going to take a quick break here and spray my loaf pan with baking spray. Was
good,
this
y'all.
the recipe last year where you put...
Oh, you don't need to bring that up. You do not need to bring that up.
So last year, I saved Dan again, even though this is his recipe. He accidentally put powdered sugar in instead of flour.
It's not like all I do is make pumpkin bread. It's like once a year.
So we're going to go ahead and I'm not sure if this is really necessary because our pumpkin bread is such different colors, but I'm going to line 6 of these with one color and 6 with the other, just in case there's any confusion. We'll make sure that we know which one's better. So you want to go like pink and blue for boy and girl?
Sure, you already know mine are going to be better.
I don't know. All right, so now we are going to add all of our dry ingredients into the wet ingredients and mix it up. And I think it's gonna get too thick for this whisk, so let's switch to the wooden spoon.
Now, what I do is I add a little bit at a time.
I was just gonna ask.
As a seasoned professional would know, you add a little bit at a time. Otherwise, it's just too much of the dry material in with the liquid.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if you're supposed to do that. I know with a lot of recipes you are. This one actually does not specify, so we'll do that too. All right, here we go. A little bit at a time, with about half of it. Oh, now it smells good. When you get the wet ingredients and the dry ingredients together, that's when it starts to really smell good. Yours is still looking a lot more orange than mine.
Yeah.
Does it say what kind of pumpkin was in that can?
I think it says eggplant.
That would be purple.
This is Homestead pure pumpkin, all natural, no preservatives, gluten-free, excellent source of vitamin A, and ingredient pumpkin.
All right. Well, mine was a sugar pumpkin from the grocery store. Could have gone more authentic by getting it from a local farm, but I did not. All right, we're going to go ahead and add the rest of this now. And I'm thinking I may have made a tactical error using the spoon instead of the whisk. I think we're going to switch back.
You'll notice I've been using the whisk this entire time.
Yeah. How? Just until blended, so we don't want to overdo this. Okay, so here's the one made with fresh pumpkin. That is all ready to bake. All right, let's get probably about half of this or so loaded into this pan here. I don't know, how full do you usually fill it, Dan? Is that a good amount, do you think?
Well, I just usually split it up evenly between 3 pans.
3 pans. But
Yeah.
you get the tiny pans.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's all kinds of experimenting going on tonight. I think we're gonna do a little more. Okay, so there's our bread. This is ready. We are going to fill up our muffin pans over here. Pink for me, for my pumpkin bread. And you can see I'm a little messy with this. I'm sure Dan's gonna be all precise and have like the exact amount measured out. But I do not. Yeah, 6 muffins each is not going to be enough, so we're going to have to make a second batch of muffins after, I think.
You want to just add more to your loaf here?
Well, I don't want it to be too big either. All right, so there are my muffins. We're going to pass this over to Dan so he can fill it up with his muffins. Yeah, so these muffins are definitely an experiment. This recipe doesn't give any directions for muffins, so we're just going to kind of try it and see how it goes. I think we're just going to put them in at the same temperature as the bread so we can cook them all at the same time, but they'll probably need to come out a little sooner. So we will experiment and we'll let you know when we take them out. See, what did I tell you? Look how like perfect and precise his are. I'm gonna zoom you out so you can see the contrast.
Well, when you go to...
There you go. See? His are all like perfect and precise and mine are messy.
You would think I went to culinary school.
So our recipe calls for these to bake at 350 degrees. The bread, that is, not the muffins. Calls for them to bake at 350 degrees for about 50 minutes. I'm guessing it's probably going to take a little bit longer than that, just because it does call for 3 small bread loaves instead of 2 large ones. So we'll let you know about that too. Also, I am going to go ahead and link the original recipe in the video description, so you don't have to worry about writing all this stuff down. If you decide that you want to make this recipe, either version of it, I'm going to go ahead and include the link. You can just click on that link. And then if you decide you want to make the version with the fresh pumpkin, just follow the directions for what I did earlier in this video to roast the pumpkin. All right, so are we ready to get everything in the oven?
Yes.
Yes, and the oven is ready. It's at 350. So...
I just remembered. I forgot to grease the pan.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
That is unfortunate.
Well, we can just scoop Dan's out with a spoon and see how it is.
Well, I guess I could dump it back in, wash the pan, and then report it.
Do you want to do that?
I think I want to do that.
Okay. All right, then. We'll be back. All right, let's take one last look at everything before it goes in the oven. Your pumpkin bread looks thicker than mine too, I think.
I think so, because it's not settling as much as yours does.
So we're going to get these in the oven, and we will meet you back here.
Well, that's going to cook real fast down there.
All right, so it's the next day. We are back with the final results. First, I just want to let you know about how long everything took to cook. So the muffins took about 22 minutes. The bread, I think, took about an hour. We started it, at what? I think we started it at 50 minutes and it wasn't quite done, so we added a few minutes on a couple times, and I think it took about an hour. That's going to vary based on your oven, but that's how long it took for us. So let's get the muffins and the bread, and we'll show you how everything came out, and then we're going to do our taste test. All right, so here are our muffins. You can see we have some that are lighter. Those are mine, and the darker ones are Dan's. So, muffins.
Bread.
So these are the breads. I think that everything came out good. So our kids did sample the muffins. We had them sample them blindfolded, so it was a true taste test. Our daughter picked my muffins, and my son initially picked mine and then switched to Dan's. I think that actually they're both really similar and both really good. I don't think there's a huge difference. So I think that either way, it's really good. We will say with the fresh pumpkin, I think the muffins tasted slightly buttery, which is kind of interesting since there was no butter in either recipe. So Dan did use a little more spice in his, which is kind of a nice touch. So you can feel free to adjust the spices accordingly if you make this recipe. So now let's take a slice of the bread. We're going to sample this and we're going to let you know the final verdict. So this is the bread with the canned pumpkin. Now we're going to slice the bread with the fresh pumpkin and compare. So I think the colors actually kind of became similar as they cooked. There isn't that big of a difference anymore.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So, okay, so let's remember, this one is the canned pumpkin and this is the fresh pumpkin?
Correct.
All right, so this is not going to be a true blind taste test since we both know which one is which. So we're just gonna be really honest and we're just gonna let you know. All right, so this is fresh pumpkin first. Should we try that one first?
Fresh pumpkin.
It's really good.
Not bad.
All right, should we try the next one? All right, so this is the canned pumpkin. You ready? I don't know, they're both really good. I do think that I like Dan's addition of the extra spices. So I think that's good.
I concur.
But that doesn't really answer the question of fresh pumpkin versus canned pumpkin.
No, it does not.
So what do you think?
I'm thinking it probably doesn't matter.
I think the fresh pumpkin might be slightly better as far as the pumpkin goes, but I do like how Dan used the extra spices. But I don't think it makes a big difference. So I think if you want to make this recipe with canned pumpkin, I don't think you'll be missing out on that much.
No, I mean, it's probably healthier having a fresh
I
pumpkin.
suppose that's probably true.
So
that's the verdict, is that we just don't know. So go ahead and try both of them and let us know what you think. All right, so thank you guys so much for hanging out with us and being a part of this little bake-off and this pumpkin palooza. I'm going to go ahead and link Andrea's channel in the video description, so make sure that you check out her channel. And I think she's going to have a playlist of all of the different pumpkin recipes, all of the channels that are participating in Pumpkin Palooza. And remember, I do still have that extra cup of pumpkin puree in my fridge, just waiting for a recipe. So I'm going to have to go through the recipe list and find something good to use that in. And either way, whether you make this recipe with canned pumpkin or with fresh pumpkin, it is delicious either way. So we definitely encourage you to try it. The recipe will be linked in the video description, so go ahead and give it a try. Anything else you want to say?
have a good one.
All right, we'll see you guys next time. Bye.